Section 6 of Psychology, the Cognitive Powers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by David Angelo. Psychology, the Cognitive Powers by James McCosh. Book First, The Simple Cognitive or Presentative Powers. Sense Perception, Part 4. Means by which we are able to estimate distance by the sense of sight. For near objects, there are three special aids provided in the organism itself, and there are others for more distant objects. 1. When we look at near objects, the pupil slightly contracts and the anterior surface of the crystalline lens becomes more convex. The process by which this is done is a somewhat complex one, in which there is probably both reflex and voluntary action. As it takes place, there is a strain in the action of the eye, and intimation is given of this by the attached nerves. When this strain is felt, we know by experience that the object is near. 2. There is a difference of the parallelism of the rays of light according as the objects are near or remote. When objects are at a distance, the rays that come from them are virtually parallel, and the eye keeps its normal shape in receiving them. But when objects are near, the rays are not parallel, even approximately, and the eyes are strained in taking them in. Announcement of this is given to the mind not by the eyeballs directly, but by the attached muscles. We come to argue that the object is near when the muscles are strained. 3. There is a difference according as the object is remote or near of the image produced on the retina by each of the two eyes. When the object is at a distance, the figure given by the two eyes does not differ much from that produced by one. But when it is near, there is a sensible difference. Place the back of a closed book before the eyes, 20 feet away, and there will be little difference between the form as given by two eyes and by one. Place it a foot away, and we see much more of the two sides by the two eyes than by one. There are other means which apply to objects at all distances. 4. There is the difference of a relative size of the felt impressions on the retina as the objects are near or distant. A penny placed close to the eye may occupy the whole field of vision, may, according to the proverb, hide the sun from the view. Place it at some distance and it will occupy a comparatively small space in the figure painted on the retina. 5. When an object, say a watch, is at a distance, the rays of light that come from it produce a much feebler impression on our organism than when it is near. We argue that an object is far off when its color is faint and its outline hazy. We infer that it is near when its color is bright and its figure distinct. 6. In our reasonings about the distance of objects, we are much guided by the number of intermediate objects on which the eye can rest. When these objects are numerous, we conclude that the object must be at some distance, and when they are few, we are apt to argue that it must be near. This rule often enables us to guess very rapidly at the distance of objects. On the other hand, as we shall immediately see, it may often lead us into error by being illegitimately applied. 7. We are often guided in our estimate of the distance of an object by its known size. The object, let me suppose, is evidently a human being, a man or woman, and occupies a certain place in the retinal affection. The image is very small, and we conclude that the object, man or woman, must be at a distance. Or it is large, and we infer that the object is close to us. When both eyes are in healthy exercise, there is a double image on the retina, but the object is seen though there be only one image. The object is perceived as single when the images are thrown on the proper parts of the retina. When they are not so, the object may be double or misplaced. The image on the retina is inverted. The arrow with the point up has the point down in the retinal image, yet the object is seen upright. This circumstance has puzzled many. The puzzle arises from the circumstance that people imagine that there must be an inner eye of some kind looking at the retinal image, whereas that image is not seen by any but the physiologist pursuing his researches. It is, in fact, a mere mechanism or means to let us know the shape and direction of the object, and it is governed by the law of visible direction, which is when the rays strike the retina, we trace them back along the line by which they have come. The rays at the base of the retinal figure have come from the top of the object, say an arrow, and we place them at the top, while those at the top have come from the foot, thus giving the object its real position. We are now in the heart of a subject which deserves a brief, separate consideration. Section 12. Our acquired perceptions. They are acquired by a gathered observation and by reasoning from this. In taste, our original perception is of the palate as affected, but we infer from repeated cases that this taste is caused by water, and this by bread or by beef, and the perception by practice may become very acute. In smell, we know at first only an affection of the nostrils, but we come to know by reasoning upon experience that this odor proceeds from a rose and this other from a lily, at this side or that side of us, according as it affects more strongly the right or the left nostril, and that the known smell must come from a near or remote object, according to its intensity. In feeling, we seem to perceive intuitively only the periphery of our bodies, but we conclude that this agreeable sensation comes from a wholesome atmosphere, and this painful one from a blow or from excessive heat or cold. In hearing, we know directly our ear as affected, but we gather that the sound comes from the right when it is stronger in the right ear, and from the left when it is more intense in the left ear, and that this sound is issued by a human voice, and this other by the wind or by a drum. By the muscular sense, we may come to know very accurately the pressure implied in a blow or the weight of an object lying on our hand or any other part of the body. Attention has been already called to the way in which we are able to estimate distance by sight. There are other acquired ocular perceptions which should be noticed. We judge the size of objects by comparison of them with other objects whose size we know. I see a plant unknown to me alongside a figure which I know to be that of a cow, and I determine the height of the plant because I am acquainted with the height of the cow. Proceeding on this principle, a painter, when he wishes us to appreciate the height of a building or of a precipice, places a man or woman in front of it. If he wishes us to know that this animal is a foal, he places beside it a full-grown horse. We can come to know the solidity of objects by means of binocular vision. Primarily, we become acquainted with the three dimensions of bodies by means of the muscular sense by which we feel round them and grasp them. The eye, we have seen, perceives intuitively only a colored surface, and a solid is noticed as a plane surface. No doubt it might see a sphere and a cube to be different, but it would not discern the cube to be a cube. But when a solid object is not remote, each eye gives a different aspect of it. By combining the two perspectives, we come to know the object as having three dimensions. Those who have but one eye make up for their want by moving the head from side to side, so as to obtain the same views as are to be had by the two eyes. Mr. Saunderson, the blind mathematician, could distinguish by his hand in a series of Roman medals the true from the counterfeit, with a more unerring discrimination than the eye of a professed virtuoso, and when he was present at the astronomical observations in the garden of the college, he was accustomed to perceive every cloud which passed over the sun. This remarkable power, which has sometimes been referred to an increased intensity of particular senses, in many cases evidently resolves itself into an increased habit of attention to the indications of all those senses which the individual retains. Two instances have been related to me of blind men who were much esteemed as judges of horses. One of these, in giving his opinion of a horse, declared him to be blind, though this had escaped the observation of several persons who had the use of their eyes, and who were with some difficulty convinced of it. Being asked to give an account of the principle on which he had decided, he said it was by the sound of the horse's step in walking, which implied a peculiar and unusual caution in his manner of putting down his feet. The other individual, in similar circumstances, pronounced the horse to be blind of one eye, though this also had escaped the observation of those concerned. When he was asked to explain the fact on which he formed his judgment, he said he felt the one eye to be colder than the other. It is related of Dr. Moyse, the well-known blind philosopher, that he could distinguish a black dress on his friends by its smell, and there seems to be good evidence that blind persons have acquired the power of distinguishing colors by the touch. In a case of this kind mentioned by Mr. Boyle, the individual stated that black imparted to his sense of touch the greatest asperity, and blue the least. Dr. Rush relates of two blind men, brothers of the city of Philadelphia, that they knew when they approached a post in walking across a street, by a peculiar sound which the ground under their feet emitted in the neighborhood of the post, and that they could tell the names of a number of tame pigeons with which they amused themselves in a little garden by only hearing them fly over their heads. I have known several instances of persons affected with that extreme degree of deafness which occurs in the deaf and dumb, who had a peculiar susceptibility to particular kinds of sounds, depending apparently upon an impression communicated to their organs of touch or simple sensation. They could tell, for instance, the approach of a carriage in the street without seeing it before it was taken notice of by persons who had the use of all their senses. An analogous fact is observed in the habit acquired by the deaf and dumb of understanding what is said to them by watching the motion of the lips of the speaker. Abercrombie's Intellectual Powers. An American Indian has such acute sight that he can discover the prints of his enemies' feet, can ascertain their number with the greatest exactness, and the length of time which has elapsed since their passage. He can discover the fires and hear the noises of his enemies when no sign of the contiguity of any human being can be discovered by the most vigilant European. Smith's Moral Philosophy. Section 13. Apparent Deception of the Senses. The Greek philosophers, down to the time of Aristotle, who corrected the mistake, represented the senses as deceiving us. The distinctions we have drawn, especially that between our original and acquired perceptions, enable us to stand up for the trustworthiness of our sense perceptions. Our original perceptions are all true to facts, but there may be mistakes in the steps we take in forming our derivative perceptions. Our observations may be limited, and we may argue from them as if they were unlimited. The taste in the mouth as a mere organic affection is always what we may feel it to be, but we may draw a wrong inference as to the object in the mouth, as to whether it is beef or mutton, as to whether it is sherry or Madeira wine, and when our palate or stomach is deranged, we may regard sound meat as unsound. We cannot be mistaken in regard to the smell as a sensation, but we may err in our conclusion that it is produced by a certain object in a certain direction at a certain distance. For our convenience, we lay down rules for our guidance as to the objects falling under the senses, which are correct enough for ordinary purposes, but fair and mislead us in exceptional circumstances. Sounds come to our ears in straight lines, but the sound coming from a bell may be diverted by a building in the way, and we trace the sound to the direction from which it has last come. A man with an amputated limb places the pain in it, because it is precisely what he would have felt if the limb had been entire. The supposed illusions are most numerous in the use of the sense of sight, and this because there are so many observations and ratiocinations implied in our judgments in regard to the position and distance of objects by that sense. We are accustomed to estimate distances of an object by the number of visible objects coming between us and it, and we are apt, when we are looking across a lake or an arm of the sea, a level plain or a waste of sand, to regard them as much nearer than they are. We are apt to draw a wrong inference when things are seen across a surface of snow. We had frequent occasion, says Captain Parry, in our walks on shore to remark the deception which takes place in estimating the distance and magnitude of objects when viewed over an unvaried surface of snow. It was not uncommon for us to direct our steps towards what we took to be a large mass of stone at the distance of half a mile from us, but which we were able to take up in our hands after 1 minute's walk. This was more particularly the case when ascending the brow of a hill. In all these reasonings we start from an assumed position and may proceed illegitimately. When he feels himself to be at rest on the deck of a ship, which may in the meanwhile be starting from the shore, the countryman starts up in alarm, for he believes momentarily that the shore is moving. When we are looking out of a railway carriage on a train starting, we may feel as if we are moving because the carriage we are looking at seems stationary, and we are not assured of the contrary till we see it passing an object which we know to be stationary, when, be it observed, we at once accommodate ourselves to the actual position. I remember, says Abercrombie, having occasion to pass along Ludgate Hill when the great door of St. Paul's was open and several persons were standing in it. They appeared to be very little children, but on coming up to them they were found full-grown persons. In the mental process the door had been taken as of a certain magnitude, much less than it actually was, and the other objects were judged by it. In a mist, the boy seems a man, and the man a giant, because in our common experience the objects seen so dimly are at a distance, and this boy or man being at such a distance must be very large to fill such a space in our eye. End of section 6.